Hello, welcome back to the Non-Essential Workers Podcast, a left-wing podcast on media, culture, politics, manipulative news articles, stuff that we prank each other with. It's all in good fun. Glad to have you with us. And I'm Alex.
I'm Aiden.
I'm Jason.
And this week is Aiden's Go.
And I'm Aiden again.
And I'm Jason.
Did you know that he's Aiden?
And I'm Spartacus.
This reminds me of the riff was like, is Xi Jinping Chinese? Is he a communist? And do you know he's a communist?
I love that you change his name every time you say it. It's great. That's
he's now Deng Xiaoping as well.
Thank you, Xiaoping.
Shows where my brain's at. But carry on. I think we're doing an episode.
We don't have to, but we could. Before
got a type file.
Before the episode, Jason and I were briefly talking about the state of things across the pond in the UK, and how they're not really that good. So I thought I would indulge myself with the coincidence of that conversation arising, and start with an article about some local affairs in the UK from Fox. Bomb squad called to hospital after a man gets World War II mortar stuck in his rectum.
Bomb squad. No one here is going to get that.
I legitimately read that because I'm apparently old as like the bomb. Like I thought it was like a rapper until the second half of the line.
So this is just an iteration on the old, like, I swear I didn't sit on it, doctor.
Yeah.
This time it's a mortar.
How could you possibly fit that in an ass?
You know, people have weird, everyone has a different fetish.
Pure ambition and willpower.
All right, well, first of all, I assume they mean a mortar shell. Because the mortar itself is enormous.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah.
That would be so
Why would you need to call a bomb squad for, like, a cannon?
I'm picturing it's like Homer Simpson. Like he refused to stand up off the mortar launcher. Yeah. Anyway. But even the shell is enormous. Like, how? How did he get it in there?
This is funny, but how does this relate to British politics, or is it just it involves them, so it's funny?
Oh, it just involves them, so it's funny. I mean, I could make a commentary about how,
what does this say about the NHS?
Like, the cultural impact of actually being heavily bombed during World War II, whereas I was pretty immune. But no, I just included it because it was funny, and then you mentioned Britain, so I brought it up.
All right, I will grant that a very small mortar could theoretically fire dildos.
Yeah, mortar shells are not that big necessarily. Like,
yeah, but World War II mortars were not the tiny little bullshit we think of as.
No, it depends. There's a lot of different kinds of mortars. It's not necessarily saying like a howitzer that's got a 5-mile range.
I guess I just want to know how damaged the rectum would have been to know how seriously I should be concerned.
I don't know. I've seen it. Rectums can fit things.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's why I say everyone's got a different fetish. Don't judge.
I'm actually not. I'm just concerned that he's injured.
There's a surprising hospital number of cases where, of people in London and other places in Britain find such. But first time I've heard about them putting them to use immediately. What a way to go.
Like the obvious thing is, it's anything's the dildo if you're brave enough. But this is so obviously dangerous that it almost makes me think it was like a creative suicide.
Not a good way to go. I'll just tell you that.
No, I think he was trying to make a TikTok, probably.
Getting blown up from the ass first.
Oh, you think it's like they're like 19? They're like, take the mortar rectum challenge.
Yeah, they're either an extreme fetishist or they're trying to start the mortar rectum challenge.
I also think they're being a little bit too precautionary. Bombs don't just randomly go off. Like there has to be some kind of ignition sequence. It's not gonna just like because you pulled it out of his ass, it's gonna blow. Like
the hospital doesn't know that, so they still made the correct decision. Like they don't know enough about. They don't know enough about the mortar to make that call.
It's like if you find a bullet that's been unfired, it's not gonna explode. It has to like.
Unless it's in the microwave or like a really hot day. Like
there's a very specific technological and mechanical method for it to go off.
And also, most stuff that's that old has. Degraded in such a way that it wouldn't be able to be fired anyway. One of the big panics we had in the aughts was like, are all those old Soviet nuclear weapons going to blow up?
Yeah,
because no one's maintaining them. But it turns out that they actually like degraded to the point where they couldn't be used anyway.
Yeah, they're like inert
for the most
now.
part. They're all basically inert. So like sometimes things actually work out. Chances are this mortar couldn't have gone off if it wanted to. But again, they made the right call. Like, why the fuck should a nurse get their hand blown off because they don't know enough about that question?
Hand blown off? They'll blow up the room.
Well, if it's small enough to fit into his asshole, it's probably not the kind that could blow up the whole room.
Alex, people can fit a grenade up their ass. Grenades will absolutely destroy an enclosed room.
But could they destroy an enclosed room if they first had to get through an ass?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just because your big fat bellies are bulletproof, ass cheeks are not explosion proof.
I was going to say now we have tension between the is bulletproof vest. And...
In fact, it would be worse because it would keep the pressure longer. It would actually create more force.
We've found a new way to weaponize our asses.
We're now a physics podcast. It's like when they launch cows in medieval times. That are
like
I read a thing recently about camels. When they die, they become bombs because all the gas is built up in their giant guts.
No,
and so if you find like a dead camel in the desert, it's basically a bomb. And don't touch them.
You have to put it in the camel clutch.
Yep. Or don't, rather.
Yes, or unless you don't want to explode.
Because it's just like a boomer waiting to...
So other than the fact that this is very funny, was there a critique of this, or are we just trying to lighten the mood before you hit us with some game?
The latter.
Okay.
He's letting us down easy.
If you're, I hope this guy doesn't feel too much shame, though, of being caught. And, well, I do think it's probably a strange sex act. Strange from my perspective.
We've all been there.
No judgment except for the judgment that I'm giving right now. Because Pope Francis says sins of the flesh aren't that serious. From the New York Post.
Yeah.
God damn it, Francis.
Yeah, it's what he usually does. He talks a good talk.
He's throwing spaghetti at the wall again.
You know that shit that annihilated all these ancient Jewish cities? Not a big deal. We're chill about it now.
Turned into pillars of salt.
What the fuck?
Look, he can't speak for God, but he is going to gossip for God. Like, whatever. Like, I heard it's not that big a deal. It's a sin, but like, whatever.
How does anyone buy this anymore?
He puts a tilde or like an asterisk next to sin that says like it's not one of the big ones. I'm like, what does this even mean?
What is this? Are they saying it's what's in Aiden, you know this probably, like in basketball there's like flagrant fouls, but then there's like normal fouls.
Yeah.
It's been, have all the sins been downgraded from flagrant, like sending you immediately to hell? It's like to now it's like, no big deal. Like,
it gives me very serious, like, don't ask, don't tell vibes.
Well, yes.
Interesting. You're saying it's like it's the way of conservatives to do light reforming. It's like this,
but
just be quiet about it.
It's like he's putting God on like a misdemeanor versus felony sin system, which doesn't like.
Yeah, exactly.
Divine will does not comport to that. Divine will is like the chief authority in your entire system of belief, the creator of all, the judge of all. He's not going to be like, well, you're only speeding 5 miles past the... Like, what are you... Is it a sin or not?
He's got pullover cop, like, degrees of freedom of how to...
I'm going to let you go with a brief stint in hell. Like, what? Like, what are you talking about?
You it's half, you get half of infinity.
Like, let's put it this way. If it's a sin that doesn't earn you hell, then who cares? It's just like, whatever. Do it if you want. Don't do it if you don't want.
Well, yeah,
if it does earn you hell, then it's a serious sin.
This is the problem when you create a totally like two absolute system. When there's no degrees for nuance in your system, you kind of can't be like, well, no, we're saying there is now.
Do you think it's a point system, like points on your license? Like you can have X sins of the flesh before it's upgraded to hell?
I think he's announcing a discounting on the indulgence price for a specific amount of sin.
Yeah, they're lowering the sin tax.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the real answer to this is that Christianity's been doing this for a long time, which is changing the theodicy about how you get judged. Well, it's really just your character overall. They kind of weigh it like, we stole that from Egypt, or like we weigh all the actions you did. Like, it's just their way of saying like, no one really cares anymore. Like, just please join us. Please give us money. Money me now. It's really just back and forth.
You know what? What if Francis was like, I've had sex? You know, like what if he like put his money where his mouth was and like slept with a Spanish erotic fiction writer? You know, like that other cardinal or whatever. Like, I want Pope Francis to like have a fucked up like 80-year-old love affair and be like, this was fine. Like, live your truth. If this is actually fine, then prove it.
Well, hang on, I have a question.
Like, what is he saying? I don't know.
So presumably, all the cardinals who eventually are able to run for pope, because it's basically political,
yeah,
had to be a cardinal at some point earlier in their life.
Yeah, of course.
But to be a cardinal, did you have to be a virgin, or did you have to just become a cardinal?
I mean, yeah,
become a cardinal later in life.
Technically, he would have been able to have lost his virginity if he was like a teenager or whatever. But usually, you enter the priesthood young, so you wouldn't have had much opportunity to lose your virginity prior to becoming that or being, like a molester. But assuming that you're not a monster and you became a priest fairly young, which most of them do, when would he have had a chance to lose his virginity?
I mean, they could just be liars,
well, of course, but okay, then admit that. Be a big man about it. Be like, okay, I lost my virginity when I was 22 because there's a hot woman when I was in training, and I was like, whatever.
I was in priest college, and
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is take risks, because the biggest problem I have with Francis is he never really takes any risks. He says the right thing, but he never acts on it in a way that would endanger his position.
Yeah, because he's just Obama.
Yeah. But it's so pardon all gay people. Give a standing waiver that says, this is fine. Then, do something, because saying it's not serious is just ambiguity. It's I agree with Aiden. It's don't ask, don't tell. It's well, are we good or not? Can we do the thing, or are we going to hell? Why would you still leave people uncertain about that?
Yeah, and we've talked about it before, because it's the pragmatic reality of constantly watching and estimating changes to the pie graph of people who will remain or become Catholics.
Right, exactly, because it's not real. It's just poll voting. They're just Republicans or Democrats just getting poll data saying all right, what's popular these days.
But it's look, Vatican II ended the blood libel against Jews basically in the Catholic Church's official doctrine by saying they were no longer responsible for the death of Christ. And you know what? They lost a few people because of that. They lost Mel Gibson's dad. and you know what? That's fine. Fuck those people. If I'm in the church and I'm not an imbecile, I'm okay, we can keep 3% of the church that are hardcore reactionary psychopaths, or we can keep, the 60% that will leave in the next generation if we don't make these modifications. It's not even a decision. You liberalize the fucking church. There's a reason why the Vatican's, Vatican II was called and was relatively successful. If they don't keep that model, they're dying as an institution. So this is just asinine if you care at all about the survival of this institution, which ironically I do not, but it's still the advice I would give them.
That's the meta question. Why do we care so much about these Catholics?
Well, I care about Catholics. I don't care about the Catholic Church.
That's okay. Yes, let me rephrase. Why do we care so much about covering the Catholic Church as an institution?
Because it's the biggest, richest institution on earth, and it influences a billion people, and it's funny.
Yeah, I'd say funny is number one. Number two is it's interesting, I think, also to kind of just see, to kind of examine the withering of such a central political and religious institution.
Right, it's a good sign of the times. I see.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing in terms of, yes, I think we all kind of agree that secularism is the future, but also it's a contemporary to the withering of many other more important institutions. So it's kind of a bad mirroring in that way, in my opinion. But
this is just so useless. It's offensively useless. I remember we covered the other time that was can women be ordained in the church? And he's I would personally say yes, but I can't say yes. Well, then you're saying no. Right? Saying I agree with you and I'm the head of the church, but I won't make that policy change is the most useless thing.
Once again, that's the most Obama Biden thing.
Yes, he's absolutely an Obama.
You say I could let you be an immigrant, make you a legal immigrant, but I'm not going to. I want to, but I can't. Well, you can.
I have the ability to. I want to, but I will not.
Well, we always talk about Joe Biden being consoler in chief. Yes, yeah. I feel for you, but I won't make any institutional changes that would actually improve your life.
Okay. Well, I guess the only real advice I could give if you're in this category, which is not so different than what we said a few episodes ago, is start doing some sins of the flesh, see what happens. What are they going to do? Either it works or it doesn't. You're the guinea pigs for this, apparently, because Francis can't just say it's fine.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's not his fault. It's really God that's wishy-washy. Yeah,
God just can't figure his shit out.
Well, we've heard from the Catholic Church and Francis on.
So we heard from God
on sin. Look out for God. Guest next episode, first guest on the podcast. Let's hear from someone else that we care about as much. Fox News, who released this report. The most sinful U.S. cities in 2021.
Okay.
Oh, we got to find out the answers.
You're really building a theme here.
Can I say I'm something of a weaver of tales?
What algorithm did they use? What sin coefficient did they use?
It's very stupid because I've read the 2020 version of this, so I'm sure it's similar.
I mean, number one has to be Las Vegas, I assume.
Well, I just no, they're like 8th, and they're all
it's like Hartford or something.
It's really fucked up because it's stuff that's like half of the stuff is reasonable, and it's like, okay, cities folks based on, like, as you say, gambling and prostitution and like exploitation, and the other stuff is like they're not Christian enough or they're too like pluralistic. It's like it's a hodgepodge of things from different political perspectives.
Because there are sins in both Judaism and Islam, which are the two other major like religions that people have, and there's sins in other religions. So
but the Jewish sins are basically the same as the Christian sins anyway, and they also don't give a shit about Muslims.
But the Muslim sins are identical, pretty much, because it's all the same. It's all the same trilogy.
Yeah, but they don't want to be reminded of that because then they don't have an extra category of people to loathe.
Yeah,
Why does Fox News think this is news? Like, this isn't. It's like a GDP of each state or like city. Like,
oh yeah, I assume it's just as Alex is kind of referring to, or is referring to from the last year's list, that they just throw in things like LA and Denver, which are viewed as like blue strongholds, and they say
Denver's got weed and LA's got rich like libs, so fuck them. They must be sinful.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, hey,
I heard they make porn in LA. Sin. Like, okay.
Hey, rabid hogs! Look, we still hate liberals and sinners, sex workers, whatever. But I mean, it is a good question though, Jace. Like, what? There must be a reason to put this out. Unless it's just like a tried and true tradition, then that would be a Christmas crime.
Right? They've been doing it for 50 years. Like, you just got to keep doing it now.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, there's like a degree of tongue-in-cheek humor to when they make these lists.
Sure.
So I'm not going to say like they're hardcore ideologues, but they are pushing ideology, and it's not good ideology. So like based on the previous year's list, which I think is not cheating to have read because I'm just running my memory and it's not the same article. Yeah. It's stuff like, is there porn sold in that city? Are there tanning salons in the city?
Tanning salons?
Stop. One, there's no sin against tanning. Two, like you're saying,
excuse me, vanity.
Porn shops, like physically,
literally, like, are there a bunch of porn shops?
Isn't like 99% of porn consumed on the internet, which is regardless of cities? What the fuck? But here's the other thing: like, I'm not bent out of shape about this because it's Fox News. This isn't like U.S. News and World Reports. Like, this isn't U.S. Consumer. This isn't like the Fox News. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I don't think Fox actually compiles these. I think Fox is reporting on someone else who compiles these. Whatever.
Well, there's even another degree of like crankdom.
But where it gets particularly pernicious is when it's like areas with the most violent crime or the most thefts, which is like, well, those are economic issues.
But they are technically
once again, they're just reading them as like, oh, this is because people have hate in their heart.
Do they measure respect for mothers and fathers?
Right, exactly. It's here are places where people are taking the Lord's name in vain. It's like, come on. They're doing like a 7 deadly sins thing, which is kind of tongue in cheek, but also kind of reactionary ideology.
Well, to me, it's more 10 commandments. It's like, as you say, places where there's gods other than God, they say that's a sin. So it tracks. It's funny.
Well, entirely inconsistent with Fox News's normal narrative, right? As demonstrated by this next article. Minneapolis crime spills into neighboring towns under attack, quotes, by, quotes, mobile criminals.
So this is a like gypsy argument.
Why would he say it like that?
It's so weirdly phrased.
Well, as opposed to what? Are they in like a wheelchair?
No, I think they're saying as opposed to residents just being shitty.
No, of course, it's outside agitators. I'm just saying mobile does not mean what I think he thinks it means.
They're the Quarians. They're a nomadic fleet of crime.
There's a reason why outside agitators or foreign elements are usually used. Mobile, as opposed to immobile, is not the right thing here.
Keep in mind, this is Minneapolis. This is like the center of police violence and being idiots, having a shitty football team. Like, Minneapolis sucks.
Yeah, but that's actually the point of the article. Minneapolis's crime is spilling into neighboring towns.
Yeah, it's
But
out
this
of
was said by the
control.
mayor of Minneapolis. This isn't said by like the first selectman of the shitty town who's trying to deflect.
Yeah, but they're basically owning how bad it is. They're like, our city's so fucked up that we're actually damaging nearby suburbs. That's the weird thing about this article. It's like they're actually taking on extra blame.
Are they asking for like the National Guard to come in and brutalize civilians or something? I don't.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But also, it's part of the same exact, like, we need more cops, and the cops need to continue to exist exactly as they've always existed, and we should stop trying to get rid of them for the very good reasons we were trying to get rid of them.
Yeah, I thought about compiling a crime scare series of articles, but
yeah,
it was just too.
It's too many. Yeah, it's all the articles. Once again, it's like take a period of some of the lowest crime and violence in both human history and our country, and be like, here's why we need more fascist guards. It's the evidence is clear.
And yeah, and it's interesting because it was both an inordinate amount of articles like this that kind of look at stats, quote unquote, which are just falsified or cherry picked, and kind of view things as like crime waves. But also, like on Google News, I would say like 30% are just about random murders and stuff and attacks.
It's becoming like your local news.
Yeah, local news is
just we cover like local sport events and crime.
Yeah, it's a crime blotter.
What I like is that I think the mayor's been listening to too much Bruce Lee. He's like, let crime be like water, my friend. It flows and crashes.
He's trying to be poetic. You think?
It's not a physics-based event. These are social and economic and like poverty issues. They don't flow. Very funny. I appreciate it.
Well, yeah. Surely things are better over at CNN, right, guys?
Well, why don't we mobily take ourselves criminally to CNN and discover?
And here's a rare visual component, a screenshot from a recent CNN report examining the dangers of growing extremism. And here we have an image comparing left-wing prejudices to right-wing prejudices.
This is on CNN?
Uh-huh.
Who wants to narrate this for our audience?
Oh my... we have to use this. This is the worst thing I've seen in a day.
I'll go ahead. Left-wing prejudices, I'll start with.
Well, hang on. Let me preface it. Mm-hmm. There's a concerned tan white man in a suit with no tie.
He might be Hispanic.
Whatever, he's white.
He's like a Hispanic Italian.
There's a concerned man in the middle of a blank void like it's the Matrix.
Yeah.
And they fucked up because it's a white void, and then they use white text on either side of him like a Venn diagram.
It's a poorly constructed image.
Saying what both left-wing and right-wing prejudices are. And I guess what they're trying to say is, these are the prejudices you have to be concerned for if you feel your friends are being radicalized in either direction.
The enlightened centrists among you, which is the noble elect, will be able to tell that the left and right wing are both bad because these are the things they both do that are exactly equivalent.
I think we should actually start with the right-wing prejudices because they're real and they actually mean what prejudice means.
Yeah.
So the right-wing prejudices are ethnic minorities. Yeah. Gays and lesbians. Yes, another small minority group.
Not the rest of the stuff like trans. Those are fine.
And feminists. Yes, an ideology that's trying to preach equality, taken most generously.
Right.
And the left-wing prejudices. How is this not made by Fox? The left-wing prejudices are against Christians, business people, and the military. You know, the poor minority that is business people.
Yeah, I mean, it accurately describes what I hate.
And people with training and weaponry. And, Christianity, the arguably largest religion in the world.
Are they listening to us?
Oh, my God.
Because, these are the ones that we don't like.
Yeah. But, these aren't prejudices.
Right. First of all, they're not what prejudice means. But secondly, what is left-wing enough to actually hold those as enemies in American media?
We are not prejudging these people based on a lack of experience and first-hand knowledge of them.
Yeah, they're my post-judices.
Right, we are judging them on their actions accordingly.
People don't often remember that people are born as business people or non-business people.
Right, exactly. You know how your skin is brown and mine is lighter brown? No, you're a business person. You're born business.
You're born business or military?
You're born with an AR-15 right out the womb.
Did you know that there's actually only one military in the world? And you're either for or against it as a monolith?
Exactly. All of these things on the left are choices. Whereas everything on the right are actual, feminist is complicated. Feminist and Christian are a little more complicated. But the two others that they cite are not choices versus absolute choices. God, what a horrible image.
He looks confused,
Yeah.
even presenting the data. So maybe he's like, what am I reading?
Why am I here?
He kind of has like the confused atheist response on Bill O'Reilly face almost, but not as indignant.
Just go full Tubin.
Yeah, so obviously CNN is like pushing its right-wing horseshit framed as centrist horseshit.
Framed as democratic horseshit.
Yeah, they're going to confuse the question of discriminating against oppressed minority groups with rational disagreement with the philosophical underpinnings of an entire unjust society. So I don't know.
My favorite political shift in the last few years is that because Trump personally did not like CNN, now Trump Republicans they're like, move over MSNBC. You're gutter trash now. CNN's the real enemy. So people now pretend that CNN is the wing of the Democratic Party, not a business, company that just hates Trump personally.
Yeah, noted leftist Jake Tapper.
Exactly. Didn't we cover one of his insane op-eds? It was we did. Man, this is great.
Yeah, this is really
wild.
I mean, it's not even different than what they usually do. It's just so baldly open about it.
Yeah, it's just putting everything together so you can see it at once and compare and contrast. And when you do that, it really is. It's so I enjoy that the left wing prejudices are kind of absurd in isolation, but when you compare them against the right wing prejudices, it's just unbelievable.
I also love the fact that there are absolutely veteran Christians who are left wing.
Well, yeah.
Like, most assuredly, many people get out of the military or become left wing because they become disillusioned with right wing ideology. And many of them are Christian.
Based on the spice company we ordered from, there's also left wing business people. All things considered.
Yeah, there's Ben and Jerry, but that's that's the minority.
Kind of a weird subset.
Most business people have totally bought into capitalist, the lies of capital and to the greed and moral twisting of capital. And they're like, no, we love this shit.
But the fundamental problem with this framing, even besides the fact that that's not even what prejudice means. Let's even replace that word with just distaste or dislike for or action against.
Or, political opposition towards.
Right. Well, there's a pretty big power asymmetry between these lists, right? Because almost everything on the left side of the list are the most incredibly powerful and entrenched people who run the entire society. And the people on the right side of the list are either marginalized academic communities or vulnerable populations of people who are regularly killed and abused.
This is what's fascinating. Because if you ask a right-winger who has the most power in the world right now, they will unironically tell you the gay agenda, brown people, and feminists. Like, this is disturbingly accurate in terms of how right-wing people view the world right now. They view corporate America as cowing to feminist and LGBTQ causes and equality causes and getting more brown people in. They view the military as lowering their standards for women and for gay people, and they view Christianity, with evidence by Pope Francis, as cowing to these populations. So in right wing rot brain, they view these things as very real and very symmetrical in their power.
If they framed this, as I think Aiden already alluded to, as ideology as opposed to prejudice, it would be left-wing ideology opposes things that are unequal and unjust and brutalizing. Right-wing ideology blames minority groups and women for all their problems irrationally. Because that's all this framing is getting at without saying it, because they don't want to say it because that would make no sense.
Man,
the left-wing prejudice is saying, stop trying to make a theocratic state, stop exploiting people and taking their money, and stop brutalizing and dominating the world with violence. The right-wing thing is like, we can't correctly attribute what the actual problem is because that would blame capital, and we don't want to do that, so maybe it's Muslims or immigrants.
But this is why these gulfs will not ever be covered. Because you're not going to get right-wing people to be like, oh, wait, this is capitalism's fault. This public relations is why I hate these people, because corporations don't want to lose.
But yeah, this is why fascism is the end state of capital. because you have to correct the irreconcilable, which is your life is getting worse under a system that promises to get better, but you refuse to accept that could be capitalism's fault. So you have to find an ever-escalating series of scapegoats for why your life is bad. And that will include every fascist hit list of like women, minorities, gays, etc. Because you can't explain why capitalism is immiserating you without acknowledging that capitalism is immiserating you unless you go fascist.
Yeah.
And you don't have anywhere else to go.
And to be fair, like the best example of this is, Germany, which very quickly has economic collapse, which very quickly turns into fascism. But not everything has to necessarily follow that timeline. And so America's on a much slower timeline because we're not having like military treaties, abusing us to accelerate this. We're doing it to ourselves. We're immiserating and emasculating and destroying our own economic system like from within. And so it's just a much slower march towards the exact same inevitable outcome. And there's people out there saying this is what's happening. I'm like, nah, that can't be.
And even besides the obviously serious ethical problems with one, equating these things, and two, holding these right-wing prejudiced beliefs, even if you're someone who's like, well, maybe there's a sneaking suspicion some of these are true, I want you to think rationally. Who is causing the problems of society? The people who own and control everything, or vulnerable communities within those societies who control almost nothing, right? Because no one's really disputing like corporations have almost all the wealth, or politicians controlled by those corporations have almost all the actual political power, or the military makes its own decisions free of almost any law or restraint. These are the things that are powerful. Feminists are not powerful. Gays and lesbians are not powerful. These are not like blocks and institutions with significant strength.
But see, that's what's interesting, because there's this contradiction that right-wingers just hold to be true, which is that while they can acknowledge the power of capital, like they want to give extra power to these populations to build them up as boogeymen. So they will not think rationally in the way you're saying, which is that vulnerable populations obviously don't have power. They think they secretly have like social power. That they have this secret power that's not obviously wealth or coercion like the military has. Well, they have this other form of power called convincing.
It's the fundamental contradiction of, say, a genocidal violence against a supposed evil caste of people. Like, if the Jews really controlled everything internationally and were so powerful, then why were they allowed to be holocausted? Like, it doesn't actually make any sense. If they were if people who are running these conspiratorial cabals and ruining your lives, as opposed to just like looking at actual power structures ruining your lives, were doing so, then they would be untouchable. They wouldn't be able to be destroyed so easily as minority groups are able to be destroyed. It's a laughably inconsistent position that these people are so terrifying and so they have so many conspiratorial webs of power, and then like we can easily trash can them at any time.
I'm pretty sure the Venn diagram of people who actually believe that Jews run the world overlaps heavily with people who think the Holocaust didn't happen. So they wouldn't buy into that contradiction.
These days, perhaps, but how the fuck did the people putting them in the fucking camps in the 40s still believe that these are the people who ran the world as they were killing them? Do you understand what I'm saying? There's a fundamental contradiction between being able to get away with horrific violence towards a group of people and being like, yeah, these are the secret overlords. It's like, well, then how are they losing?
No. The poor Jew in a gulag isn't running the world. The rich billionaire business.
Then why are you killing the poor Jew?
Welcome.
Do you understand the contradiction I'm trying to draw out here?
Yes, I'm saying they won't.
Okay.
To them, it's not a contradiction.
Well, I guess they just don't understand logic. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, yeah, I mean,
very few people do.
It identifies the beginning of your thesis, or your hypothesis, which is it all stems from kind of a frantic flailing to find a reason beyond the true one.
Yes, they're looking for a boogeyman to blame their problems on. They're not going to actually kill George Soros, but there's a lot of other people who have similar identity who are poor and vulnerable and easy to fight. So that's that. Yeah. Like they just vent their anger on those that they can actually get
because ultimately it resides in humiliation and feelings of self-loathing because you haven't lived up to this capitalist ideal of success. Because of course you can't, because it's a fiction. And instead of saying the system has lied to me and manipulated me and fucked me over, that's too humiliating to admit. So I'm going to take out my violence on an even weaker population. Which is, again, the distinction between a socialist and a fascist. The socialist can say, here's the problem in the power structure and we need to unite to fight it. And the fascist can go, no, I don't want to look at that because it's too scary. I'm just going to beat up a person weaker than me.
Exactly. Instead of capitalism did this to me and I can't possibly punch up enough to to take apart capitalism, I just look lower. Who's lower on the totem pole than me, even if I'm pretty low? And I can always punch down. That's always easier. That's always more soothing. That's the most obvious defense mechanism there is.
Yeah, which is what we've been talking about the entire time, which is when you're punching down, it's pretty fucking easy, which is why it's prejudice, because you're essentially saying, with no rational reason whatsoever, I'm going to victimize a group of people.
Exactly. That's what's so funny about this diagram. No one on the left is being punched down to. It's all punching up in this picture.
Right.
Now, in real life, yes, of course. There are people who call themselves on the left, or who are genuinely on the left, who act shitty sometimes and punch down in certain ways. Like we can talk about. Once again, I'm not saying Hillary Clinton's on the left, but like calling everyone who voted for Trump deplorable, it's not a good system, not a good prejudice to have, not a good way to actually convince people to go to the left.
Well,
she wasn't on the left.
She's not even remotely on the left, but there are people on the left who are like, let's literally send the tanks in like a communist sense. So like there are versions of left-wing oppression that do exist. Like that's not impossible historically.
I wish it wasn't true, but there are people on the left
talking about
Stalin. Like
they're not saying Stalin. They're talking about like MSNBC.
I know.
Like they don't even understand what the left is. So if they could correctly identify what the left is historically and what that actually means, you could find instances where the left was brutalizing in the specific contexts and specific lefts. Like I don't think that fucking Rosa Luxemburg or like anarchist lefts ever really oppressed anyone, but certain sections of the left had violent repression. That's true. But that's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is a laughable contrast between two different versions of right-wing ideology that basically makes it so that it's perfectly equivalent to be a fascist as just a generic conservative.
It's once again, it's iterations on the horseshoe theory. It's iterations on both parties are just as bad. It's an iteration on, both sides. This is why I'm a centrist. This is why I'm moderate. This is why I'm independent. It's once again, I don't want to take a side in this. I don't want to stake my actual ground. I don't want to reveal my actual ideology. So I'm going to pretend that it's the polarity and the poles that are the problem, and that's the extremists who are the problem, whereas us and the centrists, we're fine. It's all iterations on, we can't handle reality, so we have to pretend it's something other than it is.
Well, since we've already examined and nearly drowned ourselves in the centrist perspective, let's put ourselves in those shoes truly once and for all with this Gizmodo article. Amazon is helping researchers study how to dim the sun.
Didn't I literally call this? And we were saying like you were going to stop the sun to stop China or something?
We are unironically going to do the Matrix scouring of shrouding of the world and the Mr. Burns dome. Like,
no one I would trust more with experimental environmental technology than Amazon, for sure.
To do what? Like fight global warming? Like what are they trying to do?
Yeah, I think that's the gist, is that this is an angle to fight.
All right, I don't think I even need to explain why this is insane, but nothing we can do can affect the sun. There is no level of technology or mass or just stuff we could make that could possibly affect the sun.
No, but we could like fuck up Earth's atmosphere so badly that the sun can't get through.
The only thing we could do is maybe mess with Earth.
I mean, if we had like a thermonuclear war and blew enough soot into the air to like last 5 years of nuclear winter, yeah. But like, short of that, I don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Rotating an enormous pair of Ray-Bans around America won't.
We could pull a giant comet towards us that creates enough like volcanic ash to kill everything.
Unless they're going to do like a space elevator, then like inflate a Zeppelin over America or something to like block the sun. I'm assuming they're talking about making a more or less global alteration to our atmosphere, because otherwise I don't know how this would work. And if that's the case, why would a non-state actor corporation have any political authority to alter the entire structure of the world?
But don't worry, Alex. They're just researching.
That way.
They're studying.
Because it's like, read slightly differently, large, powerful, but private corporation is considering destroying the world.
No, don't worry. They'll do a referendum. And it'll get voted on 52-48.
This is like Dr. Evil shit about like we're going to blot out the sun as part of some convoluted scheme to get what we want. Like, what if Amazon just went full evil and was just like, we're going to do this unless you give us monopoly rights.
Give us $1 billion.
Yeah, like it's because we're fast approaching. Because like Amazon's popularity is so low now after like the amount of public scrutiny it's received for being heinously evil so many times. At what point do they just cut their losses and like, all right, we're evil?
Oh my god, how could I have not seen it? Jeff Bezos looks like Dr. Evil.
Yeah. He really
What
does.
the fuck?
Dun, dun, dun.
Mike Myers is like the Simpsons of predicting the future. What the fuck?
I mean, he fucking ate an iguana and took a photo with. Like, the dude's a supervillain. It's not like hard to tell.
He's a bald creep who wears weird outfits.
Yeah, it's like
someone just needs to like knife him in the eye and give him that scar.
In Minecraft.
Well, I'm just saying to complete the look, not like.
Yeah, he needs to decide on his own accord for himself to take out the eye to complete the look.
Well, he doesn't not take out the eye.
That's number 2 anyway. That's not Dr.
Evil. No, I didn't say take out his eye. Dr. Evil has a big scar.
Oh, the big ugly scar thing.
Yeah, but like based on the James Bond villain.
So we I think we all agree that Amazon, this is either going to be entirely impotent and empty, or it's going to have terrible consequences.
Yeah, this is a nothing burger. But if it was real, it would be insane.
Or they waste like $200 million and they're like, all right, we couldn't do it.
Yeah, we couldn't figure out how to get ads on whatever.
Or it turns out, because it's if we decipher this headline a little more carefully, it's they're helping researchers who are already doing this. It could be they're just like helping some kid trying to get his doctorate, like get some research published.
Yeah, it could be very banal. It could be like Amazon gives $100,000 to some institution saying they're doing this to try to get good press.
Yeah, kid just trying to get a PhD.
But they got pranked because the article reporting on them made it so sinister that they're not actually getting good press.
I think their end goal is going to be a situation where, like, if you sign up for Amazon Prime, then you're allowed to get vitamin D from the sun. Otherwise, it's blocked by some kind of, I don't know, ad sphere. But I wanted to give that brief conclusion of our take on that, because now we're going to look at the state of the American government's stance on protecting the environment.
I just want to briefly talk about who sponsors this show. Mm-hmm. I have Amazon Prime, but just so I can get drops in Warframe. So don't hate.
Important note. Thank you, Jason.
What? Those are linked?
The Amazon Prime linked with Amazon Gaming. So if you have Amazon Prime, you get like cool goodies.
God.
So I want to do full disclosure. I am an Amazon Prime subscriber, and it's because I like playing Warframe. In fact, I'm playing Warframe right now.
Oh, I'm glad you're focusing.
I'm focused. I gotta get this scuba survival mission done.
So bizarre.
All right, let's continue.
So, from The Guardian, U.S. auctions off oil and gas drilling leases in Gulf of Mexico after climate talks.
Whoa, that end really throws a wrench in it.
Yeah. So
like the climate talks failed? So they said, fuck it, drill baby drill? Like, what is the implication there?
There's a little addendum to this story, which is that they got criticism for this, rightly, both for the general practice and also for the obvious hypocrisy after saying that they would be a leader in combating climate change. And so they said that they had to go forward with the deal, with the selling of the leases because of legal ties, legal obligations. And then that was almost immediately proven through unearthed reports to be completely bullshit.
What exactly are they leasing? Are they leasing like waters?
Yeah, it's like drilling rights. Yeah.
Water real estate where they know there's oil?
Mm-hmm. I'm sure that it's like rights to drill to private companies.
Yeah, just have rigs and for Exxon to do what they do best.
Because it's our waters that we technically as a country have rights to.
I mean, we should be surprised because when Biden was asked, like, well, what are you going to do about energy? He was like, all of it. We're going to do all the things.
I'm going to drink it all up.
I'm going to create solar panels powered by gas. Like, what? He was just saying, like, first of all, he clearly didn't understand the issue. Secondly, his entire track record politically is to do dirty energy too, and in fact, aggressively promote it. So, not surprising at all. And then third, you got people like Kerry, who he brought on in some capacity, was like, yeah, we're not switching to green for like 30 years. They basically just owned it as like a Democratic Party platform. So, yeah, of course.
All right, so we don't have to be concerned anymore then. That's good.
And they're like, the research shows that the world will basically be underwater if we do this. Also, we're doing it.
We really liked Waterworld.
Yeah, the Democratic Party at this point has kind of entered like a 1984 like doublespeak era when they acknowledge, with the one hand, almost every like mainstream centrist, and by centrist I mean like Bernie Sanders, like critique of their shit. But then the other side of their mouth is like, also, we're not changing anything, even though we just acknowledged it was fine.
Right. Once again, they acknowledge reality, but they don't actually make changes to change reality.
Yeah, it's the Pope Francis thing, only even more sinister, because like they actually owe us something because they're elected.
It's not quite the Pope Francis thing, because that's like fiction. This is we acknowledge reality. We have the power to change reality, but we refuse to change reality because it's not reasonable. It's not realistic. Yeah. We're too captured by wealth. Like they kind of acknowledge that now.
Like, do we have to wait for Pelosi to die so that we have, one fewer billionaire deciding whether we can tax billionaires? Like, I don't know. Like, there's a certain point at which
I'm not sure she's quite a billionaire yet.
You know it's not going to change. Like, it's not going to change. So these articles almost just serve to torture us with like what we already knew, but reminding us. It's kind of like the memento of climate change. Like, we have to wake up every day and be reminded that the Democratic Party is evil and won't change on
these
climate
are sneaky
change.
Rub it in articles where they're rubbing our face and shit and being like, sorry, we can't do anything about it.
I don't know. Lot in life. I mean, again, none of this is actually news or surprising in the sense that like this is their open platform, but still repugnant, still horrifying. Like, there's no one to vote for. There's no one to vote for of the major political parties that will change this. So the next time they're like, it's the most important election ever, it's like, yeah, you're right, which is why you can't vote for these two parties, because they're both committed to dirty energy. They've shown it time and again. This is the guy they rigged across the line. They could have rigged anyone across who wasn't this ridiculous on energy.
All right, I have an idea. Now, I haven't thought much about it, but it sounds good in my brain.
Perfect.
We should have a threshold of, like, if we're not going to do mandatory voting, we should have a system where if not enough people vote in the general election, we have to basically do it, like, get new candidates in and try again.
we have to keep voting until 50% show up.
Right, like we should set some threshold and say if not enough people. Well, because what I'm saying is the problem with our current system is if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. But people who don't vote obviously still have a voice. So how do we make it so that if you choose not to vote, you're also participating in the political process and you don't feel like you're giving in to vote for some devil?
Well, the other problem is when you do vote, you also don't have a voice because you're constrained to two horrible choices.
Okay, not a voice, but a choice. So what I'm saying is, if America collectively decides not enough of us are voting because we don't like the choices presented, the system would then be like, all right, well, we have to get new candidates to run and maybe like these people better.
Yeah, you're kind of roundabout getting to ranked choice voting or any sort of parliamentary system where you could just vote for the one you prefer. And it won't in any way.
Yeah, it would be like a de facto vote of no confidence in both parties.
Right. If I could vote no confidence for every position, I would do that in most elections.
Because right now, the primary system, which is another ill-advised system by the Democrats in 1968, is a system that really just rewards the most entrenched. Whereas what I'm saying is we need to punish the most entrenched and reward the majorities of people. So I don't know. There's got to be solutions there. Obviously I know that ranked choice like what's it called, like Dorset voting or something, I can't remember what it's called. Condorcet vote, yeah, is like the best system, but I don't know, there's got to be some simple, easy to explain way to people who don't want to who resent the political system, that like by not voting you're also contributing and doing your part and this will somehow help.
I mean, like the Marxist take is like, well, you have to overthrow the state, right? Because it's not happening. Like they're clearly not willing to do it. Now that's also basically impossible in our current arrangement because we don't have a large enough group of people who want to do that. So it seems, I mean, one of the most frustrating things about being in this time period is like having clearly all the theoretical means to make this work and seemingly no actual ability to make it work. Like the tools are there, they're lying unused. We have every technological capacity to just change the way we do business and not destroy the world, but we're not doing it. And I'm not, at least in the United States, I don't really see a current political venue short of just a somehow successful third party to modify this, because the Democrats have only become more reactionary in response to the resurgent left. So, like the Democratic Party's fucked. I don't know why we would even waste our time voting for anything that they're trying to do anymore. As far as I'm concerned, they may as well be back to being like a Southern reactionary racist party for all the good they're doing. I don't know. I think we're just fucked, right? Like, because we have to fix the environment imminently, and no major political party in the U.S. is trying to change that, and the U.S. is the single largest polluter. So, what? Like,
we've just given up. We just acknowledge that the world will be shit. and it's just we're okay with it. We're tacitly okay with it.
I mean, we're fundamentally not okay with it. It's just we don't have any means to affect power.
Okay, those in charge are tacitly okay with
it. Yeah.
Because they're the only people who could change it, and they decided not to.
It's one of the many reasons that you want to have like an age limit on who can be in politics. Because if you're going to die before the consequences of your actions, you probably shouldn't be making decisions. But that's a separate question.
If you're incredibly black-pilled at this point, it takes all from the fact that it's not only Americans who are feeling that way. That's another Gizmodo article. Controversial assisted suicide pod cleared for use in Switzerland.
Oh boy.
I saw this. It was really funny image they used. It basically was like the thing from Futurama.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I don't really see the problem other than people making an uninformed decision. But
yeah, it's almost like the abortion thing. It's like you have to go through 6, forums and counseling before you make that choice. It's like,
right, you have to get an ultrasound of like your own brain before you can.
Yeah, it's like, look, obviously this isn't the desirable outcome, but to deny people the right to determine their own course of life is pretty brutal.
Yeah, it's all a bit grim.
I mean, it sucks that they're doing it, but it sucks even more to deny them the right to do it. So, I don't know. I mean, this one's somehow like I think a lot of people find this really upsetting, probably because they know someone who's important to them who killed themselves, or because they experienced those thoughts themselves and are like glad they didn't act on them, or because they have an issue in the family with mental health. It's like, yeah, that's all very understandable, but personal opinions and like emotional reactions to things generally should not be informing whether or not you grant other people human rights.
That's a very interesting point, Alex. Most people do not like have empathy to a very well-versed degree that they can actually understand what other people are going through. So what they read is assisted suicide pod. What are they going to make me kill myself? Like, people view all these things as normative. They view all these things as not a choice for a very few amount of people who deserve right. They view it as like conscription. They view this as like, oh God, now it's all normal. Now people can be killing themselves left and right. Like,
I wasn't even going to be that cynical, but I was just saying, like, they don't want to think of their friends or loved ones or anyone else who's ever had these issues in that way, and it would leave a negative taste in their mouth about the entire idea. And I think the most comparable thing is to like almost any other issue that people would become upset by on like an emotional level, but don't really have a rational reason to oppose. Because at the end of the day, if you don't want people to be killing themselves, then you need to make their lives tolerable enough that they don't want to kill themselves. Right? The solution is not to lock them in a prison of life and throw away the key. That's just torturing them until they die of natural causes. The solution to prevent suicide is to make people's lives good so that they don't want to kill themselves. The solution is not to torture them by forcing them to live. So if you don't like suicide, then help people who have mental health problems and help people who are suffering from extreme problems in their lives that they're not leaning towards that as a solution.
But the question here is, should the state be in the business of making more efficient your ability to kill yourself? Because to me, it almost has like there's an interesting like gun debate argument here. So for example, we're not going to totally get rid of violence, but what the state can do is try and minimize the efficiency of that violence. So for example, by limiting the access to guns, you limit the ability for people to kill lots of people at once. But here it's like if you want to limit, suicide, do you, as you say, improve people's lives? Or do you make more efficient and easy and quick, expedite the process if people do want to, in fact, kill themselves? And by letting this pod thing be legal.
I mean, to me, it's just
like catch-22.
State sets up abortion clinic. It's like, okay, it's not a question of whether they're encouraging abortions. It's that if that's something you want to do, you need to have access to it. It's not saying you should commit suicide. It's just saying that they've cleared the use of a facility that would allow it to be possible.
But I actually think the abortion issue is not that similar, because the concession here is that abortion is not actually killing someone, whereas suicide is actually killing someone.
Yeah, but it's by their own agency. I mean, if anything, to me, it should be less controversial because no one is being wronged.
No one's being wronged in abortion either.
According to the religious delusion of the opponents of abortion, there's like a person being wronged.
Yeah, they are psychopaths.
But in the case of suicide, while they are certainly a conscious adult, they are making the decision for themselves. No one is doing this to them. So no one is being wronged.
But the issue here is people aren't isolated. People have relatives and people who care about them. A fetus does not. So actually, suicide has more of an impact on society than abortion, because suicide actually affects real people who then have a ripple effect.
There are ripple effects, but no one is directly being killed who did not choose to be killed, right? So this is
You're saying with even a right wing framing,
right? There's no version of this that should really be as controversial as it seems to be. I know a lot of people who are even like left wing who are horrified by the idea of legalized suicide. It's like, okay, but you're not in a situation where this would actually appeal to you, so you're just kind of deciding that it's emotionally troubling enough to you that you're going to restrict someone else's human rights, and I just don't think that that's a good argument.
Also, I think there's two caveats I want to get into. One, it says assisted suicide, which is a distinct thing from normal suicide.
Is it?
Yes. Assisted suicide almost always is limited to people who have like a terminal disease, people who are struggling with severe pain. It's not just people who are suicidal. So one, I think there's already a carve out here, which is already limiting in terms of the rights. And secondly, what was the other thing I was thinking? I can't remember the second one.
There's a suite of ideas that tend to be very distasteful to the mass public. And when I'm about to use this term, don't confuse it with the political party of the United States. There's a libertarian philosophy. And by libertarian, I mean the philosophical position of individual liberties and individual rights. And like, I would even consider myself a left libertarian, which is to say the values and rights that we have, basically the right to agency for yourself and to be who you are and do what you want to do, short of infringing on other people, is very important. It's always been important as part of the Western sort of philosophical canon, but there's a lot of people who are very uncomfortable with giving people that much freedom because they might make decisions that are bad for themselves. And that's true. That's one of the biggest downsides of a libertarian position of any stripe. But it's kind of a necessary evil because the alternative is to restrict people's freedoms and rights in a way that is arguably even worse.
But America loves restricting people's freedoms.
When people say, like, should people have the right to harm themselves in various ways? I mean, it's not a question of whether you want them to do it. It's a question of whether the state should be in the business of restricting them from doing it.
Okay.
And they're both bad things, but I think the state restricting them is almost always worse.
Now I remember what the second thing is. And you're exactly right, Alex, because in America, at least, we already concede this by letting things like alcohol and gambling be legal. Right. We already let people engage in quote-unquote sins and vices.
Right.
And, but the question is, this is a Switzerland thing, where there arguably is more libertarian freedom, and America's getting all butthurt about it. But the second thing was, it's a sin, though, and so America won't like it because suicide's a sin.
Well, America's not officially Catholic.
Yeah, but apparently they put out the sin report every year. So, what I'm saying is...
Yeah, the federal government's sin report.
That's the tie-in, is what I'm saying. It's that, people are also queasy about this, in America at least, because they're religious. And there are very practical reasons why religions outlaw suicide, and it's to keep their numbers high. That's why they don't like birth control, because it keeps their numbers high.
There's definitely a eugenicist element to this, but I don't think there's any country on Earth or any sane political movement on Earth that's like, yes, we should all be doing suicide all the time. Like, short of a Jonestown situation, I really don't think that that's a common position. It's just that there's a misrepresentation of that libertarian position as like, yeah, suicide's great. It's like, no, of course it isn't. It's just that you don't want to create a precedent of restricting people's personal liberties, because otherwise you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater of trying to create a public good by harming individual liberties in a very serious way. Forcing someone to stay alive against their will is actually pretty horrifying and dystopian.
It's torture. It's basically,
and you consider the various forms of misery that people be in, especially, as Jason points out, in a lot of cases, totally unpreventable and permanent pain and misery that people with crippling medical conditions often find themselves in, who seek out something like assisted suicide.
That's why, to me, this is more like the Jack Kevorkian stuff. And less like, oh, see this, the Democrats are now pro-suicide. It's like, no, it's...
Right. But this is perfect fodder for reactionaries who want to frame the left as if they love suicide.
Yeah.
Which, again, no one is saying. But...
What do you think, Aiden?
The leftist country of Switzerland.
Like the fucking tax and corporate haven for the entire world. Notable leftist.
Yeah, I mean, we've spent a good amount of time on that, so I'll just quickly put forward 2 points. One, there's no indication outright that this is at all like state funded or that the state is involved.
They just legalized it and like regulated it.
Yeah, so that's why that's. I mean, I could be wrong because I haven't read the article, but it's interesting to me. Not interesting. What was depressing to me was that there is, from a capitalist perspective, a market demand for increased opportunity for suicide. Although with the caveat for...
Well, you don't pay for this, do you?
I wouldn't.
This isn't like an expensive endeavor.
I imagine your estate pays whatever trivial fee, but I mean they have to pay rent.
I don't know. I think this is good. This sounds like a totally government paid for insurance kind of thing.
This is what it looks like. It looks like something you probably have to pay for.
Oh fuck! It
looks like something out of Mass Effect.
It's halfway between a gigantic computer mouse and an Apple product.
It's a cryopod. It's the classic sci-fi cryopod.
It's called the sarcopod, which is short for sarcophagus.
That is brutal.
I mean, if I was considering assisted suicide, this would put me off.
Maybe that's the intention.
No,
maybe make it so fucked and weird. They're like,
this is. I would assume they were gonna preserve me to shoot into space or something.
Well, that's the other thing. Just why don't we invest in cryo technology? So if your life shit just freeze you and they open you up in 1,000 years like Fry, and maybe things will be better then.
Why does it have a little middle mouse button thing in the middle of it? What the fuck is that?
The pod so you can see yourself die. Or the glass.
Yeah, why are people able to look in?
That's
because it's got to be Joe Marketing got involved. I don't know.
I actually legitimately am starting to think this is meant to make you reconsider because I don't want people to look at me if I'm getting killed.
Well, it's not going to be out in this park. It's not going to be a public event.
But it's open casket by definition. This is really weird.
Yeah, well, here's the other thing. We don't know how it kills you. We don't know how quickly. We don't know where this happens. We don't know if you have to pay for it. We don't know anything. We're just what's going on.
You know what? I think it's actually grimmer than that. It's they want to make sure that you don't last second change your mind. So they have to make sure they're watching you the whole time.
Probably.
You're saying it would be done almost like lethal injection, under supervision?
My guess is that they want to make sure that they see you the entire time in case your last second, oops, I don't want to do this.
Well, so then they can let you out or just keep you locked in and smile?
No, so they can let you out. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Well, I don't know where you're going with it.
Sadistic.
Well, there were coffins built in older periods of time which had release valves on the inside.
Right, so if someone wasn't actually dead.
In case someone turns out to have not been dead, just had a severe, comatose period, as they could let themselves out. Which they actually think is the origin of a lot of mythology around vampires and ghouls.
Yeah, and there's a number of famous cases even up to the modern day where people they think they're dead and they bury them and they're not actually dead and then they die scratching them.
Give people several days to die and be dead before you bury them, folks.
Or just have
conditions that make death.
Have actual good science and a mortician and people who actually know what death means. People who do actual autopsies and can tell if someone's dead or still alive.
The second thing that
not just ghosts and shit.
I was gonna say is just that I completely agree with the personal autonomy, personal liberty arguments. The only thing that slightly concerns me is the idea of lowering the barrier to committing suicide, because I know plenty of people with suicidal ideation.
Yeah,
it's increasingly common, and I feel like if this were a free thing that you could walk down the street and do without judgment, while that would be good for people for whom it would truly serve, who are unfortunately lost to this world, I don't know. I feel like
that's the joke of the Futurama suicide capsule.
Yeah.
Is that just you can go make a collect phone call in a phone booth, you can go kill yourself.
Well, that's why I was asking at the very beginning. Are they going to have you go through a series of you've gone to therapy, you've gone to
once again? That's why I think the caveat of assisted suicide. I think that it was very important that they included that, because I don't think they're saying this is just a normal suicide capsule from fiction.
Yeah, I mean, as we've joked, it looks like you're going to have to get on your grind to earn enough money to die from this thing.
Right.
Well, and to Ian's point, yes, there's an extreme barrier to entry of suicide. You usually, if you're a man in America, you have to buy a gun, and if you're a woman, you have to buy expensive prescription pills to poison yourself. So it's a very extremely daunting endeavor in the first place. And the vast majority of suicide attempts are failed suicide attempts, where people try and are not able to, or don't have not the courage, but can't go through with it. And so this is, as Ian is saying, this seems oh, you want to go through with it? Okay, we will guarantee success.
Well, we'll never know the true details, but certainly spark some conversation.
Good article, though. Very
it's a very dark topic and one that I think is actually very important, but you can't really have a conversation on it without everyone getting depressed.
Yeah.
I'm not depressed. I thought this was interesting.
Well,
I think this is a philosophical, discussion that was brought about by an interesting article. Thanks, Switzerland.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Important to talk about, and not often talked about because it is so uncomfortable for most people.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's uncomfortable. Not that I want people to be in distress, but you don't want to be yeah, sounds sick. All right, calm down.
Hey, stop judging me.
You're supposed to be reluctantly okay with it, not thrilled.
Well, no, it's as you say, it's any philosophical thought. What do they call it? A thought. thought experiment is not supposed to make you feel jolly. It's supposed to really
right, like
push you to think.
I'm completely pro-abortion, but someone who's like, I'm getting an abortion every day. I'm like, like why? Like at a certain point,
it's an abuse case.
You're like, well, now you have like a weird fetish. Like that's a different thing than actually needing the service.
Yeah.
So anyone who's like too enthusiastic about a hard choice makes me raise an eyebrow.
Yeah.
Well, excellent segue prompt, Alex. Speaking of fetishes, you guys know how Trump is still president? You're aware of that, right?
Oh, although like he's secretly, he's got a clone.
Yeah, Biden's already been killed, and this is a fake Biden.
And the rat boys and the mole people and everything, and Trump's killing everyone.
Yeah. How the rat boys doing?
That's also just a slew of articles I saw. Just so there, I have to give some prompts for all the ignorance and stupidity. There are definitely some untapped like creative writers among the QAnon.
Oh yeah, Q is all about like fanfic.
Well, they're all like right center to right wing trolls who are like, I really want to use this English degree somehow.
Yes, actually, that is actually true.
Yeah, that's who they are. Like that, I bet probably who Q was. It's like I have this useless, college degree that my other conservative friends make fun of me for having,
and I love trolling because I'm a sado narcissist.
Yeah, because I spent my entire life on 128-bit Chan, and so now I have to,
I actually want to correct myself.
Pretend I'm in the military.
I actually just read a research paper. There is an extreme difference between narcissists and like trolls. Narcissists usually view themselves as above shit like that, whereas sadists who love internet trolling in like a statistically measurable way are usually not narcissists. They're usually
in fact, they're usually self-loathing.
Yeah.
A true narcissist genuinely loves themselves, which is actually not that common in America.
I just wanted to correct the record.
Hate ourselves.
I found it very important to hold myself to a higher standard,
and we appreciate that. That's why
of not mislabeling the trolls.
Yeah, you can't troll the trolls.
Business Insider though does not seem to have any real creative writers, but they do keep their obsession with Trump. It seems, of this entirely, and it's just such a pointless headline.
I like how we struggled for like 3 minutes to just say this headline.
We're excellent at this podcasting. Trump yelled, quote, "What the hell was that?" End quote, after the White House's Middle East plan went off the rails. Book. Business Insider.
Okay, I misinterpreted this. I thought with all the preamble we just had, you were talking about crazy people who were saying that Trump is still president. But what you're saying is a different phenomena, which is articles that all they do is cover when Trump was president because they can't get over it.
Yes.
Okay, I'm with you now.
You guys didn't go the direction I thought you would, but it was still entertaining enough to entertain for a little bit.
So the big expose is that he said, "What the fuck was that?"
Yeah, and that's a headline.
Oh my God.
So I had to take several runs of this to tell what the fuck they're talking about, and here's what I've gathered. Here's the scene. Trump is at like a bar, not drinking because he doesn't, but like watching the TV petulantly as it talks about Biden giving like his commencement speech for why we fucked up in Afghanistan. And then he kind of turns to this guy, like, "Can you believe this guy? What the fuck was that?" That's the entire story.
No, I think it's the opposite. I think it's saying sometime in 2017, he pulled Jared Kushner and a bunch of psycho generals into the the war room, and they had a discussion. And Jared Kushner's like, "Well, what if we just nuke them?" Like that's how it went off the rails. He's going,
but why would a 4-year-old piece of information be getting an article?
Because they're, as Aiden said, these people are deranged. They can't get over that we elected Trump as president. So now they have to go through, write books and exposés about every fucking minute detail of the Trump administration.
I'm not saying that couldn't be the case. It just seems really weird that they're doing a specific quote at a specific event now. Like,
yes,
they would have quoted this then.
The whole point is that this is a weird, hang up that the media has with Trump.
Why was this not reported at the time?
Why was it reported at all? It's a nothing.
Well, yeah, but
I mean, it seems like a book was just released with like a bunch of behind-the-scenes details.
All right. Yeah. I have an answer to your question, Alex. Seth Wickersham is an ESPN reporter for the Boston area who writes a lot of stuff about the Patriots. Now, he's not like Tom Curran, who's kind of like everyday reporting. He's a kind of long-form writer. Okay. He just wrote a book that came out this year, 2 years now after Tom Brady has left the Patriots. And he writes this big expose all about the dynasty, all about the 20 years, all about how Tom Brady and Bill Belichick were secretly mad at each other the whole time, and how Robert Kraft was like calling Bill Belichick an asshole behind the scenes with all his billionaire buddies. Like, and so to answer your exact question would be the same here. Why is this coming out now? Because people are obsessed with shit like this.
I will actually
airing
clarify.
dirty laundry later after the fact.
I forgot that it said colon book. It actually makes sense to me now. Because they're quoting it from a book, which is quoting a previous time period. I understand.
There was a very famous book that came out during the Trump administration where this weird, like, sniveling journalist guy somehow, like, snuck into the White House.
He, like, conned him.
Yeah, he just, like, said, I belong here. And, like, all right, fine. And he wrote all the shit that was going on as all these people getting fired, like, day after day. And it was very funny. But he obviously did it for pure profiteering motives. But it was still very funny. He was exposing the Trump administration in real time.
Yeah, it was how, like, Trump was, like, dripping cheeseburger cheese on his gut or whatever. Like, yeah, it was a very stupid
and
thing.
Everyone hated each other, all the people he hired. Like,
it's like you couldn't tell that from how Trump behaved.
But the point is, people are still writing those books, like, today. Like, the history is still being recorded about this useless fat fuck.
So are they trying to do, like, a upside-down book reading George W. Bush 9/11 thing? Like, are they trying to frame him as incompetent and confused in the face of adversity? What is the dig of this article?
That was part of my question to you guys, is because the quote is pretty benign. Like, we know he says much more vile and, like, vulgar stuff.
I'm actually kind of glad that that's what he said. Like, what if he was like, I'm fine with this?
I think they're trying to do the remember the Aleppo thing with that dumb libertarian guy who's like, what's Aleppo? Like, I think they're just trying to say he's dumb.
What, Gary Johnson not knowing what Aleppo was?
I think they're trying to say Trump is somehow, like, ill-informed, but, like, so what? This is not of all the things that Trump is Teflon towards. Like, this is not an important one.
You're supposed to be upset about something going wrong in foreign policy.
Yeah, this and not even that, but, like, the advisors all being crazy assholes, which is also because to me it's saying the meeting went off the rail.
In the context of this sentence, we're not given enough to know that didn't make sense. Like, if the quote was something like, Trump watches people burn alive, goes weird. Like they'd have to give a context like in which he's monstrous.
Like he's Kim Jong-il looking at factories. Like,
right. They are failing at their one job, which is clearly to try to do a hit on his character, as if we needed that to tell he was a bad guy. Because they didn't give us enough context to know why yelling that was significant. It's just in a void. Tell us what the thing happened that he's reacting to, or else you've lost all punch to this headline.
Yeah, but that's why the whole thing's so confused. Like, there was never a punch. All the punches that should have landed didn't land anyway. He's not president anymore. Like, this is a negative number article. This is not even measurable on its effect.
Like, it's not very good at propaganda because it fucked up the premise. But if it had not fucked up the premise, then it would have just been a bizarre, like, center-right attack on Trump, because that's the problem and not the entire history of reactionary thought in the United States, which is what they're trying to get to, which is like, pay no attention to the fact that every other part of our politics still suck horribly. It was just because of Trump, which is the overall liberal propaganda, because their attempt is to say, don't listen to all the leftists who are growing in significance in our population because they've been pointing correctly all the problems. No, it's just Trump. In fact, Republicans are also fine. We like them more than the left.
Trump is the ultimate scapegoat for everyone in the political like spectrum. And the same way that, when George Bush became, like, anathema, you have you have McCain and Obama saying, we're not Trump. We're not Bush.
Yeah. They want the Biden White House to inch away from Trump, basically.
Yes, and because Republicans, who are non-Trump Republicans, are terrified that if Trump runs again, he'll lose. And that there's no one else really in the Republicans who could, like, win other than
both parties are so intellectually bankrupt.
Both parties are really
who
scared.
Does either party run that anyone likes in 2024? There's not a goddamn person.
Remember like 10 episodes ago when I predicted Ron DeSantis is going to run and win?
Yeah,
that's what's going to happen.
He might be the only person less qualified than Trump to run a country.
I think he's arguably more qualified than Trump was.
He's killing Florida even faster than Trump killed America.
Yeah, but he's still, like, in government and been in it for a while.
Well, that's qualifying enough. He hasn't been publicly hanged like Mussolini for his crimes.
But what I'm saying is, that's what we consider qualification. Have you already done this? America. I'm not saying actually qualified. I'm saying like,
have you failed up long enough?
Yeah, exactly.
As long as you're in the place.
Although Trump's pretty good at failing up, so
in the job, in the office, you're good. Yeah, it's like a passive XP. You just accrue it over time.
Passive XP, like watching your constituency die by the thousands of a preventable.
Maybe that's why he's doing it. He gets XP for every kill.
Yeah, he's farming them like boars in Warcraft. Fuck's sake.
Well, all right. Let's take a turn to more venerated, experienced politicians. Lest I pretend that mainstream media is only obsessed with Trump and the right wing. Hillary Clinton chokes up as she reads part of the victory speech she hoped to deliver in 2016 from NBC via their Today platform. And there's a video to accompany this, of course, which I did not watch.
So you're saying Hillary Clinton recorded a video for either her own media distribution or for NBC Today, whatever that means.
Yeah.
To show how sad she is that she couldn't read her like abortive speech 5 years ago.
Sure seems like it.
This is just Hillary Clinton publicly masturbates.
Yeah, that's how it reads. Yeah. And NBC is happy to jerk off in the corner.
I mean, Trump's already almost politically irrelevant. I can't think of someone less politically relevant today than Hillary Clinton.
This would literally be like if Al Gore did this. If he's like, in 2000, I had planned to be a good president. Here's my notes.
Now that's interesting. I'd be very keen to hear what a speech from 2000 would look like, because 20 years had passed by. Like I could barely even remember. I was very young. I could barely even remember what the political convention was like then. And so I'd be very interested to read Al Gore's acceptance speech from 2000. Whereas I don't care. And Al Gore actually had the election stolen from him. He didn't botch it. Although he kind of botched it at the end. But
Hillary Clinton chokes up as she reads speech that Melania Trump would have stolen from her had she won the election. This initially, at least, this actually made me smile because Hillary Clinton being sad for any reason is very funny.
Well, now who's the sadist?
No, because if it's about someone who's intrinsically a monster. Hillary Clinton is a horrible piece of shit for very obvious reasons that we're not going to go into detail.
I also would say,
because
we're not saying Hillary Clinton, everyone who's like a Democrat should feel like we want to see them suffer. It's just her in particular.
But someone who scuttled like any real hope we had for changing any of this by controlling and owning the debt of the Democratic Party, literally to the tune of only like $20 million. So like we're destroying the world for $20 million at the end of the day. One of the few individuals who could have averted the course of history we're currently on, so she can, choke on it, whatever she'd like. But the point of this seems to have been, right, like that she is like nostalgic for when there was hope and like maybe we could still turn things around in 2016, which is very funny because it's like relishing in the failure as if that's meaningful instead of saying, I ate shit so hard and failed to avert Trump, which even by their logic is a colossal catastrophe.
Interesting. So the headline really should be Hillary Clinton chokes up as she admits that she botched 2016 harder than anyone's ever botched.
Correct. Because even to a center-right generic anti-Trump guy, it's like you were the only person who was supposed to be able to prevent this and everyone thought for sure you could prevent this and you didn't prevent it. How, like, you should never show your face in public again. Because Trump is the worst thing that's ever happened to America, according to these people, and Hillary is the one who's supposed to stop him.
Right.
So even by their logic, she's a horrible piece of shit. She should be like shamed out of public life completely after Trump. I don't like how, in what universe is anything she did acceptable considering what it caused? Like, maybe if she hadn't had a private fucking email server, we wouldn't have let 600,000 people die of coronavirus. Right? Like, because of her bizarre, criminal, shitty...
Oh, I see what you're saying.
She allowed a fucking fascist to take over the country because she couldn't get her own shit together enough to even be likable enough to beat Donald Trump. Because she was so horribly unlikable as a candidate.
So you're doing like the chain of events from her losing this election.
She's the RBG.
Right.
She's the one who could have made a change that has serious downstream effects. If she hadn't been such a horribly unlikable bitch, then we wouldn't have had Trump. So it's like no other single individual has as much responsibility after Trump himself for the Trump presidency than Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, that's true.
Why the fuck is she still talking?
Because she fundamentally doesn't view it that way.
Yeah, she's a victim of American voter stupidity.
Because the irony is, she actually does embody the like victimhood mentality. She thinks she's been victimized by all this stuff.
Yes, because she is a narcissist.
Yes, exactly.
Just like Trump.
Right.
We failed her. According to her worldview.
Correct. The American public failed her.
She was owed the presidency, is what she almost certainly believed.
She was ordained by God to be the first female president.
No, she was ordained by capital. She literally bought the presidency.
God and capital. And it's America's fault for being too anti-feminist to let it happen.
She literally took on a personal financial debt by buying out the DNC's debt in order to purchase the presidency. So she felt it was owed to her financially to become president, which tells you everything about her worldview. And she was robbed in a financial transaction of becoming the leader of the free world.
She's calling Amazon customer service saying, I paid for product and I didn't get product.
She's the ultimate Karen.
She was betrayed by the trade deal meme, essentially.
Yeah. I offer you private, behind closed doors purchasing of your entire party, and you offer me presidency. And then it's like, oops, that didn't happen.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you think Obama bought Buttigieg to bow out during Super Tuesday to fuck Bernie?
Yeah, I think he bought him with like a hoagie. I think he was like, okay, we'll throw you.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, what do you think the actual cost of that is? Like, is this why Buttigieg's being shoved down our throats these days? Because Obama's like, I'll buy you a political future?
Well, first of all, yes, but I think Buttigieg was an easy buy. I don't think Buttigieg's very smart and really took that much to sell. All he had to do is be like, Big Daddy Obama will owe you something.
We'll give you your baby.
Yeah. We'll give you a shot. We'll give you like transport secretary or some bullshit. And that's what they did. Like they to pretend as if Obama didn't explicitly rig the 2020 election is kind of laughable at this point because he basically just said he did it. But yeah,
I mean like a shot at the presidency in the future.
Is anyone at this point still thinking it is not proven that 2020 and 2016 were blatantly rigged by the Democratic Party to make sure that they got the most conservative possible candidate across the line? And even then they fucked it up. Because 2020 should have been a sweep because of how awful Trump was, and they barely clung through such that it created opportunity for right-wing grifters to act like that's not what happened. And 2016 was a complete fuck-up that actually let Trump win. So, like, these people who've been telling us that they're like, if we don't listen to them, then it'll be a disaster. It's like, well, they've created 2 disasters now. So, and that just in the last 2 times they had a shot at it.
What other political figure would get an article published about something they did 5 years ago? Or didn't even do? Like the amount of
the failure they had 5
years. The amount of like what's the word? Like privilege that she already has just to keep existing and not be shunted into space is astounding.
George W. Bush Reed's address he was going to give at like Iraqi University of Freedom had the country not fallen into sectarian violence and horror. It's like,
oh God, and they're also trying they're trying to bring back Bush.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like these are people who have failed the country, themselves, their party, everyone spectacularly. And they want to self-congratulate? Like, there's no version of the American political spectrum outside of the Trumpers explicitly who would be approving of what Hillary Clinton did.
And another bizarre dynamic of this for me is that we're so far away from the next presidential election. It doesn't seem to me like this could really tie into.
Yeah, this doesn't have like a Democratic whipping effect.
So it's just like it's
just getting wine mom sad so they'll vote D. This is just a vanity project.
Yeah, vanity. That's all. She just didn't feeling lonely.
But it's like sad vanity. It's not even like success vanity.
She's unhappy because she hasn't been in the news in a while.
She's just looking for likes.
Does anyone remember me?
Yes.
Remember when I was relevant?
Wish I didn't, but yeah.
I would so gladly get myself like Men in Black mind wiped of every.
Do you remember when I was failing you instead of Biden failing you? Or Trump failing you? I mean, come on. If I was a corrupt political monster, the last thing I'd want to do is be remembered when someone else could take the heat. Like, all she has to do is retire to like a fucking mansion and do whatever evil shit she wants to do and just roll in cash. Why would she? I mean, we know why, because she's a narcissist. But like, stop drawing aggro.
This reminds me.
You're finally off the hook.
This reminds me of all the shit that's going on with Boris Johnson right now. The Tories are in the midst of another political scandal. Actually, two at once. Just petty corruption and like violating COVID restrictions that they put in place.
Yeah.
But the reason I mention it is because to these people, like, it seems to me that the modern politician doesn't actually even do it for money anymore. They do it for fame. They do it for clout. They do it like the way a fucking YouTuber like does it to become famous, whether that carries with it money or not.
We have like fucking brain diseases where we have to have everyone giving us likes all the time now because of social media.
Yes.
So like, this is like if Gorbachev like showed up at Pizza Hut and he's like, "Here's the speech I would have given in the 1992 summit of the Soviet Union if I hadn't destroyed it." It's like, what the fuck? Like, this is the last person you want to hear from because it's the person who most people look to and blame for the failure of the state.
I don't blame Gorbachev.
Well, it's not 100% his fault, but the vast majority of Russians blame him for the failure of the Soviet Union.
Well, yeah, but
and you know, someone who's failed foundationally to right the ship of state, showing up and be like, "Here's the commencement address I would have read." This is the most pathetic thing you could possibly do as someone who claims you should have been in charge. Here's my live journal entry that I wrote when I was sad because I failed to become the leader of the world.
Yeah, this is definitely more pathetic than that book she wrote, like Shitting on Bernie.
Yeah.
While we're talking about boss ass bitches, let's move on to a story from the LA Times before we go out with a couple less stressful articles. Let's check in again, as we like to do, or at least I like to do every week, with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris to announce new private investments aimed at slowing Central American migration.
They're just saying it, huh?
Yeah, what?
They're just putting it out there.
We're going to contract out, like, genocide and no social mobility?
So what the fuck does this even mean?
I did read this article a little bit because I had the same reaction as you did, Alex. But talk if you have any initial reactions.
Like, what are they planning? Like, are they paying like a security firm to put landmines on the U.S.-Mexico border? Like, what the fuck are they talking about?
I think they're genuinely doing the Trump wall.
Is this a Democrat speak way of doing the Trump wall? A new private investment to restrict the flow of migration across the border. Like,
this is just how they talk. Like, this is Democrat speak.
Yeah, it's the same. It's like, you know, it's the police adjacent shooting shit for the Trump wall. It's like a border transgressing prevention structure.
Yeah, exactly.
What? I don't. How did they even manage to do like the neoliberal thing? Like, we've privatized fascism. Like, stop it.
Well, see,
say what you're doing.
It's a get out of jail free card. If you privatize it, it's not technically fascism.
Yeah. We've created new prisons run by and filled with undocumented migrants. I don't like what private investment would change the fact that people are fleeing poverty and violence? What could you do? Invest in their country's well-being? We're not doing that.
Well, actually, that is the stated goal, Alex.
Yeah.
However,
okay, let's hear it.
However, instead of doing it in any kind of way that empowers local governments or is directed with the advising of experts who have vested interests as residents of those countries, we are soliciting multi-million donations and investments from companies like PepsiCo to increase private industry in those countries, which will, of course, trickle down into improving the most important, this is mentioned multiple times, of issues of corruption in these Central American countries. And once PepsiCo eliminates corruption, people will stop feeling like they need to flee the country.
So the ownership of the commercial and industrial sectors of these countries' economies by foreign corporations for profit at their expense is not corruption.
Of course not.
Uh-huh.
What are you talking about?
New assisted suicide nets installed on factories at Pepsi factories. baffling. What's really weird about this to me is that this is a long-term plan. Like, this is like 20 years from now, there won't be as much migration because we, built a Pepsi factory. But the Democrats are taking the long view while also doing one of the most short-sighted and idiotic things possible, which is like, let's prevent the flow of human migration for some reason.
This is what grinds my gears about this. Immigrants stimulate your economy. Why aren't we stimulating our own economy by letting immigrants in? Why are we trying to lie about stimulating other countries' economies to keep their own immigrants?
Maybe Harris is trying to reduce her amount of people she has to put in prison by reducing the amount of people in the country.
Like immigrants, and even like normal Republicans acknowledge this. Like capital C conservatives acknowledge this. That like immigration is actually extremely necessary to pay for all our social systems and to like generally rise the standard of living and the GDP and the average wealth of everyone.
Yes, because a disproportionately old workforce is too much of a strain on a welfare system compared to having young people in the system.
Not to mention that we are on the edge of facing what may be a immigrant labor crisis, as immigration has vastly dropped across our borders.
And we have worker shortages.
Yeah.
Incredible worker shortages. Like every fucking news article is about how there's not enough workers to do jobs. Why are we trying to stop them?
Because they're brown.
That's it.
We're brown. America's becoming brown. Tan everyone so we can't tell.
Yeah, what if the article was written like, noted brown woman vice president prevents brown people from migrating? Like, the more racist take would actually reveal something more interesting.
Yeah.
Which is that person descended from both migrants and slaves prevents migration by reinforcing the slavery in their societies. Like, come on. What is the U.S.'s track record for political involvement in Central America?
We don't talk about that.
Because every fucking time we get in there, we manage to like fund or reinstall or upgrade local brutality and fascism. So I guarantee you this is not good. That they're not funding something humanitarian here.
Have tried to make South and Central America into like cyberpunk without any of the cool technology. We just want corporations to own it in entirety. I thought it was very it's just so insidious to like to make the headline like the conflict and contradiction between the headline and the way that the article in text frames things, as the article itself talks about, still through a horrible strategy, but about tackling the root causes of people fleeing their home countries, as the quality of life and risk their life being too low and high accordingly. But like the headline just gives it away. Like, we're not doing this because we actually care about those people. That's not the reason we're doing any of this. We just don't want them, for whatever political reason, whatever messaging reason, to come into our country because there's a panic about it right now.
It's even explicitly racist.
Yeah.
They didn't just say migration. They're literally saying we don't want these Hispanics. Like, what? They didn't say like new measures aimed at reducing total immigration into the United States. They're literally saying we do not want all of these Latinx people coming in. This is a Democratic Party. That's their base. What are they doing?
Committing political suicide.
Yeah, you see, or at least I've seen many memes over the last few years about the Democrats' response to like their own failures being to look into the mirror and saying we need to be more racist. And it seems like that's true.
The Democratic Party and the Republican Party are both so terrible at politics and making good decisions that they counterweight each other's terrible decisions. Because the Republican Party is actively killing their own base with coronavirus and intentionally alienating Hispanics and other large growing populations of the United States with explicit fascist racism. And the Democratic Party is like, what if we mirrored that? What if we continued deportations? What if we took on bizarre elements of the white genocide mythology into our official policy? What? The Republicans were literally killing themselves. Why would you mirror it? It's one of the few times the Democrats actually had this more together than the Republicans. Like, no, we made too much sense.
No, woke culture is the problem.
The fuck are they?
Remember, it's the feminists and the gays with power.
Do you remember when Biden sent Kamala Harris there with a message that literally was just "Don't come here"?
Yeah.
The other stuff's like saying the quiet part loud. It's like, well, that didn't work. They're still coming here. Time to finance, a junta or whatever the fuck they're planning to do in some one of these countries. This is very frustrating.
I mean, On the other hand, it's kind of just fair, right? Coca-Cola had its time for Death Squad. Now it's PepsiCo's time.
Yeah, they changed the ownership rights.
Oh, jeez. Well, times are tough, obviously, all across the world. And so, as I bring us out of this episode, I'd like to first start with a nice new career opportunity that seems to be presenting itself for people who are looking for a bit of extra cash in their pocket.
Assisted suicide pod technician repair?
Nope, not touching suicide again.
All right.
From CBS, tree that smells like rotting fish is so invasive, states are offering bounties to kill it. You heard about this?
It's the new kudzu.
Is this in America?
I'm assuming it's that flower that some people hate the smell of and some people like. It's not like a Japanese thing that was imported here.
It's from CBS, so I do assume that, yes, the invasive species is in America.
But I vaguely remember there's like some like allele that makes most people smell it as gross and some people like it. I don't know.
Huh.
It might be a different thing that smells like shit.
I like how nature is also mad at us. Nature is trying to get rid of us and just piss us off and make us feel bad at an accelerationist pace. I love it.
I wish it was trying to get rid of us. No, it wants us to be alive to smell rotting fish. Deal with this. It's like a Cthulhu-esque punishment. A pleasant, New England township where everyone's fish people.
Yeah, this is exactly. This is very, emu wars, very man versus nature, stupid shit that we love doing. But this is at least not like a political issue.
And at least this form of bounty hunting isn't targeting like abortion doctors; it's just targeting a tree. So I'll take it. I'll take what I can get.
We'll take what bounties we can get.
I'll take Dogwood the Bounty Hunter.
That's a good one. Good fun.
Yeah.
All right. Second, mildly humorous article comes from cambridgenews.co.uk. Cambridge students complain of settling for shop-bought cakes as college has no pastry chef. One student said the situation is so dire that it feels like the loss of the Cambridge experience. So, we have talked many times about the elite institutions of education around the world, especially in America, but also, I think, last episode in Britain. And sometimes, satire creates itself.
I'm actually not. I was very mad when I first heard you read this, but I'm actually less mad than I am, or than I was a moment ago.
Take us through the journey.
So, it reminds me of when you went to college, Alex.
Oh yeah.
And they had all those like vegan salads and like they had really good food. Like one of the few perks you get at college is access to some nice things, some good food. Some people like we're progressive. We cook this out of feet and it works. So I actually agree with the loss of the Cambridge experience. And England is so up its own ass about pastry and like cooking. So I actually agree with the bottom sentiment. It is absurd that with Cambridge and their endowment, they don't have a fucking pastry chef on staff. But also they can all eat shit. So
apparently they are. Store-bought cakes may as well be shit.
Stores are run by people that make things. There are mom and pop pastry places who serve business.
This article could have been like, having to shelter in place has prevented the chronic rape endemic in British school systems. We've lost the experience of growing up. It could have been much worse than this. So if they're missing out pastries, I'd almost rather hear about that. I think Bake Off is probably one of the only good things Britain has done for the world as well. So I think they might just be owning that their cultural center has shifted from being the military juggernaut of the world to making pastries. And they really have to prepare for that at Cambridge, where the elite prepare to become pastry chefs.
Well, so that's funny. No, they don't prepare to become pastry chefs. They prepare to become financial advisors. Yeah. Who rely on pastry chefs to feel full.
Yeah, but what if you did want to study that? They have no pastry chef who could even serve as a professor.
Wow. Really makes you think.
If you think about it. Yeah, so apparently the Cambridge experience was just stuffing your face with fucking pie, which I find kind of incredible.
It's very funny that yes, this is central to it as being.
It's why you go.
Have custom eclairs delivered into your face hole.
It actually kind of makes me nostalgic for when we had first world problems. You know, like, because you could be like, the situation is so dire that the loss of these cakes is ruining the experience. Like, when that could be taken seriously was not that long ago. Like, there was a time when we were not in constant political, economic, environmental, and health crises in my own lifetime, and you could read one of these and be like, oh, that's kind of rough. And that time feels so far away.
Yeah, it is impossible to have sympathy for this at this point. Even
this is a Harry Potter problem.
Yes.
This is literally a problem that he has to solve with, like, learning a spell.
We've lost the spell for cupcake conjuration.
Yeastus fermentius, and he's like mispronouncing it, and he like can't. And he keeps trying to make pies, but it just like explodes.
He keeps saying yeastus instead of yeastus.
Yeah. And then, like, later on, Rowling reveals that it was like a metaphor for yeast infections, and everyone wants to kill her again.
The cupcake was definitely not trans, Rowling.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have no strong opinions on this, honestly. It just kind of makes me nostalgic for when the world was better.
And you weren't supposed to. It was supposed to be mildly amusing.
Yeah.
And so that's appropriate. And now I wanted to end on truly just kind of a nice note. And this will not be relevant to any of our listeners because it is about an event happening tonight. But
carry on.
Geminid meteor shower could bring one of the best and last showers of the year. So for us and no one else, I hope around 2 a.m., if you're still awake, you go out and get to witness a spectacular display of the wonder of space and nature as a fantastical meteor shower crosses the skyline.
Because they're cutting the water off. There's no more showers this year.
Exactly. And yes, this is also about Flint, Michigan.
Yeah.
Be miserable.
This is what CNN sees fit to cover.
I wish it was this and not the other stuff. Just banal bullshit would be preferable to open propaganda.
Oh, and this is actually interesting. This makes me think of, I've been watching a lot of football lately, obviously. And because of that, I'm subjected to watch television. Or even if it's like through the internet, it's still television. So I'm watching ads. And you can very visibly and palpably watch the transition to, like, the holidays.
Yeah.
And we just all pretend that for December, everything's great. And even though the ads all now star brown people instead of white people, which I don't care about, like, they pretend that everyone's life is amazing, and everyone has a Christmas tree, and everyone's getting a new Lexus with a giant bow on it. And just the way that corporate America tries to sell America to Americans is so disgusting. They're like, and the meteor shower will be great too, and everything's fine, and don't worry. And then it'll be New Year's, and everyone loves New Year's. Just turn on the telly and look what happens in Central Park or Times Square.
Wait, do you mean to tell me that the American population isn't 80 to 90% black and brown people smiling at each other and their family looking at each other at awkward angles?
As they buy a $100,000 SUV.
Yeah, and they're all wearing like $200,000 a year income sweaters and
they're all in a fucking McMansion.
Yeah,
in suburbia.
You're telling me
Americana?
You're telling me that Get Out isn't the model for most economic relations in the United States?
Yeah. It's kind of rich watching the, like, don't worry about the last 2 years. It's fine. It's December. Christmas is over here. It's going to be great. Holidays.
How did Key and Peele never do a bit on that? Because, like, they are the entirety of advertising demo.
Because they're not smart enough.
Affluent, sort of brown people.
Because they're not black-pilled enough like Chappelle.
I don't know. Their stuff is pretty good.
It's okay. It's
passable. There's some real good ones.
This was our 30-second deep dive on whether we like it.
We show them what for.
Well, I do have a lot more articles, but they are all extremely depressing. So I think
Let's
call
go
it
on a high note.
And yeah, I mean, I think if we've learned one thing, it's that Hillary Clinton deserves more time in the limelight.
Yes, that's the takeaway.
Why didn't we give her a chance?
She's barely had any influence over anything.
For shame on you, America.
She's had it so rough.
Hillary Clinton never got to read her speech. Leave Hillary alone.
When you put it that way, she never got to read her speech. It just makes it so much more evident how pathetically funny it is.
I mean, but she's at her funniest when she's pathetic.
Well, see, that's what's brilliant. Britney Spears actually got a good ending.
Yeah, but oh my God, Britney Spears is now doing better than Hillary Clinton.
Yes, unironically.
We're not in the darkest timeline.
Oh my God, there's
a tiny Schadenfreude-esque light in the darkness of Hillary Clinton getting her ass kicked by Britney Spears.
And that
one wealthy white woman is doing better than another wealthy white woman.
Yeah, but the one we like is doing better.
Praise be.
That's the best we can hope for. Wow.
Oh man, I would have voted for Britney Spears over Hillary Clinton.
I think I don't know her positions, but they can't be worse.
They really couldn't be worse. And she'd probably advocate for people who are stuck in fucked up legal battles.
Right, at least she has like a little like a political hullabaloo thing that she, her personal involvement that lets her be an advocate for.
I have a vague memory of her being like a Bernie person too. So
you might be thinking of either Cardi B or Ronda Rousey.
I'm not thinking of Cardi B. There were actually a whole bunch of people who came out. I think she might have been one of them. But regardless,
to me, the ultimate tragedy is that I'm also a giant UFC fan, and there was a great UFC event on Saturday, and it was amazing. But the problem is that 95% of UFC fighters are all insane reactionary, like Trump, Bitcoin conservatives. And the only one who was not, Ronda Rousey, came out publicly to support Bernie Sanders, but she's also a giant idiot and loser. So.
That's because they all fucking watched Fight Club and were like, the point of this movie is that we need to do violence to each other. It's like, all right, well.
Not really. It's not quite that. There's actually a really well-developed reason for all of them having this political ethic. It's because they've all bought into the American myth of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, just work hard, train, get good, and like they feel that's a transferable, scalable way to live life, not instead of just the way that they succeeded. So they're all insane conservatives.
Yeah. And also CTE tends to damage your ability to reason critically.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Doing violence wasn't the point of
they think they do violence,
I need to go watch the movie again.
Yeah. Actually, you've been watching the movie the whole time, and there's two U's. I'm not going to spoil too much Fight Club for people who somehow haven't seen it yet.
Watch it. It's good.
It's pretty good.
It's an enjoyable watch.
It's not really going to teach you anything too,
no, but
it's a fun popcorn movie.
And you'll get to see Jared Leto beat to a pulp, which I find
but that's when he wasn't as bad, so it's sad.
Yeah,
he's Blondie.
Yeah, he's a pretty guy.
Oh, I completely forgot that.
He's only now like a weird creep cult sex pervert.
Yeah, I have the.
His music's pretty good though.
Ability to retroactively apply his current sentence.
I'm going to now retroactively forget he was in that movie, so I don't have to tarnish an already questionable experience.
And
it's gone.
And
you listeners, retroactively wipe the worst parts of this episode from your head. So it's only good stuff.
Yeah. May your previous prejudices and opinions slowly seep in like they usually do, and not be concerned by such trivialities as the news. We will see you next time, maybe with something shorter or longer. Depends how we're feeling.
See you next time.
See you then.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoy what we do here at the Non-Essential Workers Podcast and you want to support us, please check us out at patreon.com/non-essential-workers-podcast or by clicking the link below.
For $5, you get access to the Patreon feed and twice as many total episodes.
How many more?
I'll say it one more time for the back. Twice. Anyways, thanks and see you next time.